Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all the distinguished speakers, guests, and friends. Thank you for spending some time with us on this Saturday or Friday night. I'm Helena Shaw, Associate Director at Columbia Global Centers, Beijing. So today's webinar, Taoism Teaching and Learning, will feature presentations by the world-renowned scholar of holistic education, including Dr. John Miller, professor in the Department of Curriculum, Teaching and Learning at University of Toronto. He is also the author of Holistic Curriculum 1988, as well as a moderated discussion by Dr. Ruan, Executive Director of Center on Chinese Education, with education specialist Xiang and the Tian. So speaking of the subject today, just very briefly, now more than ever, I think the administrators are seeking new ways of to effectively teach students in a time when people are paying more attention to theorizing new educational philosophies and developing new and innovative ways of delivering instruction. Dr. Miller and his collaborators are seeking wisdom from ancient Chinese Taoist principles to promote a holistic approach to education. It really presents such an inspiring perspective and reflective thinking. So we're very eager to dive deeper through today's discussion into what has been suggested as means of refining and improving pedagogy in their new book, Taoism, Teaching and Learning, a natural-based approach to education, University of Toronto Press, 2022 and beyond. So the program is presented by Center on Chinese Education at Columbia's Teachers College, as well as Columbia Global Centers, Beijing. So the Center on Chinese Education is an excellent academic unit at Columbia dedicated to cultivating a better understanding of education in China and to educational exchange between the United States and China. And the Columbia Global Centers, Beijing is a regional hub in China of Columbia University, aiming to facilitate and promote academic exchange and research collaboration between Colombian student scholars and with their counterparts in the region. So last part on me, before we start, please do post your questions and comments in the Q&A function on Zoom or in the chat box of the channels, the Weixin or Bilibili live stream platform during the discussion. So the webinar admin will transfer them to Zoom for the panelists to review. And we also have a wonderful translator help if you wanted to pose that in Chinese. So now without further ado, I will turn the stage to Dr. Henan Chen to give a brief remarks and kicking off the program today.
Thank you, Helena, for your wonderful introduction. Good morning, friends in China. Good evening, friends in America and Canada. I want to start off with a few words of gratitude. First of all, I want to thank all audience for sharing your precious time during the weekend to attend this event. Your generous support motivated us to work hard to promote international collaborations in education. Meanwhile, I would like to thank Ms. Xiao and her team at Columbia Global Centers, Beijing. We have been close partners in the past few years and successfully co-hosted several important events. I also want to give a big shout out to my brilliant assistants, Ruan, Dora, for helping the Center on Chinese Education organize this event. I particularly want to thank the three speakers, especially Professor John Miller. I'm very grateful for being connected with Professor Miller during the pandemic and collaborating with him on several important research and training projects. I have always been inspired by his warmth, kindness, wisdom, and compassion. In chapter 4 of the book, Professor Miller quotes Slingerland. If you have De, people like you, trust you, and are relaxed around you. Professor Miller himself is such a person with a lot of De, which makes him a great teacher. The first time I met him, I feel like he's already an old friend. We have been knowing each other for so long. so I can trust him and be myself in front of him. Last month, I attended Professor Miller's keynote speech at a national conference on spirituality in education at Teachers College, Columbia University. At the end of his presentation, Professor Miller led the audience for loving kindness meditation, which until today, I can still feel the power of it. I hope you will feel inspired and empowered by his book and presentation today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Miller.
Thank you, Professor Xiang, and it's really great to work with you again. I really appreciate all the work that you've done in bringing holistic education to some people in China. So it's so nice to see you again and work with you again, and all the people that you work with at Columbia and in Beijing. So I just wanted to say a little bit of background about the book. As a very young person, I got interested in Eastern philosophy, in Buddhism and in Taoism, and particularly as reading the Tao Te Ching. I've read that book many times through my life, and I've been inspired by it. In 2019, I was teaching a course in holistic education, and there were several students from China there, and they did a presentation on Chinese philosophy. And two of the students are presenting tonight, and I met with them after the course that week, and we brainstormed about writing this book together. So we started in 2019, and then they went back to China at different times, but they weren't in Canada. So we were negotiating distances and COVID to write this book. So it was a challenge to do that. But in the end, we were able to pull it together, and the book was published this summer. And so delighted to be able to do this book launch tonight. So we'll start with the slides, which outline some of the main ideas of the book. So what is the Tao? And this is actually from a text called Wen Tzu, but it quotes Lao Tzu. There is something, an undifferentiated whole that was born before heaven and earth. It has only abstract images, not concrete form. It is deep and dark and silent and undefined. We do not hear its voice. Assigning a name to it, I call it the way. The way affects the movements of the heavens and the stability of the earth, turning endlessly like a wheel, flowing ceaselessly like water. It is there at the beginning and end of things. As wind rises, clouds condense, thunder rumbles, and rain falls. It responds in concert infinitely. So it's very hard to say exactly what the Tao is. And that's, I think, one of the beauties of it. It's this mysterious thing that underlies everything. Everything comes from the Tao and goes back to the Tao. And we can't fully understand it intellectually, but we can get a sense of it intuitively. So I'm going to now talk more about some of the related concepts. So the next slide, please. So much of Taoism is connected to nature, and using nature as a way of understanding the nature of things. So there's a lot of references to different aspects of nature, and here is one quote from the Tao Te Ching. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. This is like the Tao. And yeah, so again, this idea of it's content with the low places that people disdain. And we see in Taoism this reference to lower places. There's always reference to mountains as well, but to be comfortable with different aspects of nature. And then Alan Watts, an American philosopher, he wrote a lot about Taoism. And he said, nature is something you must trust, the birds, the bees, the flowers, the mountains, the clouds, but also inside human nature. And so so it's learning, the Taoism teaches us to trust nature and to trust our nature, our own human nature. And the more that we can do that, the more that we'll be in harmony with the way of things. So the next slide, please, Dora. So I'm going to talk a lot about now self-mastery or self-cultivation. And when the word self here is not, I'm not referring to the ego, I'm referring to the deeper self that we all have. Maybe we could use the word soul, but again, it's not the ego, it's our deeper sense of who we are. And so much of Taoism is about cultivating that place within ourselves. And so I'm going to talk about different things that let us do that. So one is silence and solitude. So this again is a quote from the Tao Te Ching. So a way that can be articulated is not permanent way. So the function of speaking is small, while the unspoken is great. So there's a lot of emphasis on just silence and listening. By listening, we can really understand nature and the cosmos. And then the second quote is interesting too. So facial expressions can reach where talk cannot, and feelings may reach where expressions cannot. What is felt in the mind emerges from the body. So this is written like, again, 2,000 years ago, and it refers to what we call now embodied learning, that our bodily experiences are very much connected to how we learn and how we know. And to be in touch with our body is really an important part of self-mastery. So the next slide, please, Dora. So another aspect for self-mastery is contemplation. And again, this is a quote from a commentary on the Tao Te Ching. The embryo of the Tao is formed through the soft and gentle practice of contemplation. Contemplation allows the person to access the inner power. Inner strength is the only true source of teaching. It makes connections. So this is a very, like, I think, very important, like, quote in terms of teaching, that if we can teach from this place of inner power or the inner strength, and that is really the source of good teaching. And so in my own teaching at the University of Toronto, in two of my courses since 1988, I asked students to meditate for 5 weeks. And that's to cultivate that place of inner power. And I've written about this in another book called The Contemplative Practitioner. And again, over the years, at the end of the 5 weeks, the students write about the power of the meditation. And it's been amazing the effect that it's had on developing that place within themselves. And the more that the teacher can do that, the stronger they'll be able to connect with the students. The students will feel, again, Henan talked about da, or day or da. I don't know what the exact Chinese pronunciation is, but that's what they're referring to. The more that you can develop that, the more the students will respond to you as a teacher. So the next slide, Dora, thank you. So a next thing in developing the self-cultivation is sincerity and presence. So this is again a quote from the Win Su document. Those who embrace reality and exercise true sincerity move the spirits of the heaven and earth beyond conventions. They make their way and attain their aspirations by sincerity. Even if they don't say a single word, nevertheless, all the people in the worlds, the birds and the beasts, the ghosts, the spirits, evolve along with them. So it's that, I think another way we could, in terms of sincerity, is we could talk about the purity of the heart. If we are sincere and our heart is pure, this is a very, very powerful thing that, again, our students and others can sense if we have that. And again, again, presence and the Da is a way that can arise from our sincerity and the purity of our hearts. And this, again, the way that we develop self-mastery and self-cultivation. And I just love the phrase that all the people in the world, the birds and the beasts, even animals, and can feel the sincerity if we have that. Yeah. So thank you. The next one, please. Yeah. So Wu Wei is a very a concept that's associated with Taoism, and it's for Westerners. This is a hard thing for Westerners to understand, but because Western thought, it's always about doing. And Wu Wei is one of the translations, has many different, but effortless action or spontaneous action that is in harmony with the way. And the idea here is, Lisa, as I understand it, the more that we're in the harmony with the Tao and the way, our actions are just arise spontaneously because we're in harmony with things. We don't have to try so much because we're part of this larger flow of being, if you will. And so one of the Western concepts is closest is grace. And Sarah Kaufman wrote a book on grace that I found very helpful in talking about Wu Wei. And she says, grace allows us to walk lightly and easily, to treat others sweetly and gently, to receive and savor the gentleness of others. Grace in all its dimensions exists so we can move well through life. And I think that is also, if we are in touch, if we are having Wu Wei, we can move well through life as well, with some sense of ease. And again, in a time of such great stress and anxiety, the possibility of living a life of greater ease and spontaneity is very, very, I think, wonderful and appealing to people. So again, this is another, I think, strong attraction to Taoism and to relating Taoism to teaching, because we can actually have experience of effortless action in teaching. Of course, there's always some effort in teaching, but we can have moments or even extended moments of Wu Wei in teaching where things just seem to happen spontaneously and wonderfully, if you will. So the next one, Dora. Yeah. So they get again, the Taoism and text talks about nonviolence and embracing the feminine. And here is again a quote from one of the Taoist texts. Therefore, sages keep to the feminine and get rid of extravagance and arrogance. Because they keep the feminine, they establish the masculine. Being as female to the world, they're able to avoid spiritual death. And this is and we'll talk about, again, the concept of the yin and the yang, and the yin being the feminine and yang, the masculine. And Taoism is one of the few really spiritual spirituality that where the feminine and the masculine have equal weight. The masculine doesn't dominate, which again, there's been a tendency, particularly in Western religions, for masculinity to be the dominant thing, the yang to be the dominant thing. But in Taoism, they need to be in balance. The feminine and the masculine need to be in balance. And even Gandhi himself, he referred to himself, I counted myself as a woman. He recognized the feminine aspects. And of course, that he was the practicer. He was really the practicer of nonviolence. And so the feminine and the nonviolence were fundamental to Gandhi in his work. So this is the power of the feminine and the nonviolence, again, that Taoism nurtures. So thank you. So the next one, Dora. So again, I don't have time to like go into the whole Chinese cosmology, but basically the idea that there was the whole, and then it broke into the two, the yin and the yang, and then the yin and yang come together to create the myriad of things. And if the yin and yang are in balance and connected, then that leads to health at all levels of the cosmos and of the earth and of all institutions on the earth, and even into education in the classroom. And I think Tian might say a little bit about this, but so the yang in terms of the classroom is focus on the individual and the content and the knowledge and the rational and quantitative assessment, and a focus a lot on assessment and evaluation and the use of technology and techniques and strategies. And the yin is more focused on group learning, a focus on process, the development of imagination, the use of intuitive thinking, qualitative assessment, a focus on learning and how children learn, and the focus on the overall program, and also having a vision of the whole person. And again, a healthy classroom has both of these in balance, so that if it gets too much one or the other, then the energy becomes stagnant. And the idea is that to keep the energy moving in the classroom, you need to have both of these things going on. And each teacher needs to find the balance that is right for him or her. Okay, so the next one, please. So something about Taoism and holistic education, because they share a lot. The Tao is a vision of the whole in which all beings are connected. And holistic education seeks to be in harmony with how things are, the way of things, and focuses on connectedness. So both of them, again, well, of course, the Taoism is the larger vision, and the holistic education fits within that larger perspective. But holistic education seeks to be in harmony with the nature of things. And if unfortunately, and again, particularly in the West, education tends to be fragmented. We break things down into courses, then units, and then bits of information. And what happens then is the student sees that things are fragmented. They don't see how things are connected. And it's so important that the reality is at every level of the cosmos, things are interconnected and interdependent. And the more that people can see that and act with that understanding, that leads to well-being. But if you do not see that, and you see things as very individualistic and atomistically, and if that is the way students are taught, that leads to suffering because they're out of touch with how things are. So holistic education attempts as much as possible to be in harmony with the Tao, with the whole. And that provides the basis for an education that's truly in harmony with the universe. So Taoism, with its emphasis on nature and connectedness, provides a powerful context for holistic education. So the last slide. Yeah, so just summarizing briefly, holistic education and Taoism emphasize interconnectedness and seeing ourselves as part of the whole. Secondly, seeing nature as a guide to living and using nature as something to reflect on in our lives, and as a way to, and I should also say that nature as seeing the beauty in nature and seeing beauty in the world and in the cosmos. And I think that's often in education today. There's not enough talk about helping children see beauty, because beauty contributes to well-being. And the more that we can see beauty, and nature is a source of beauty. Nature at its course is very beautiful. And the more that, and I think so much being caught up in the cell phone and and social media, we lose that connection with beauty, natural beauty. So again, self-mastery or self-cultivation, I think, should be a goal for teachers and students. And the things that I talked about of the contemplation and the nonviolence are ways to do that. And then the talk, again, particularly for teachers, to talk less and listen more. And again, this I think is one of the main message of Taoism, that really the less we talk, the more that we can like listen, first of all, to what nature is telling us and what the universe is telling us. The more that we can quiet down, the more that we can hear what nature and the universe is saying. And if we talk too much, we can't hear that. And helping students to learn that as well. And finally, to include the yin, to embrace the feminine with the larger vision of wholeness and gentleness should be nourished. So I'm going to finish my, again, Professor Cheng mentioned that she asked me to do this loving kindness meditation. So I'm going to do that now. And it's really, this is sending thoughts of well-being first to ourselves, and then we move it out to our family, and then finally to the universe. So I say this phrase, may I be well, happy, and peaceful. And then we just have a moment of silence, and then I move on. So if you can do this with me, you can either leave your eyes open or closed, whatever you feel comfortable with. So let's start. And just take a breath to settle down. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May my family be well, happy, and peaceful. May my friends be well, happy, and peaceful. May my colleagues be well, happy, and peaceful. May those that I teach and care for, may they be well, happy, and peaceful. May my teachers be well, happy, and peaceful. May those that I meet in daily life, may they be well, happy, and peaceful. May those that I'm having some difficulty with, may they be well, happy, and peaceful. May all beings on the planet be well, happy, and peaceful. May all beings in the cosmos, both embodied and in spirit, may they be well, happy, and peaceful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Miller. This is wonderful. Yeah, when we are having this meditation, it just make me think about connect with my son who is far away in Peru, and my parents who is in Wuhan, China, and also to people who I haven't met, where I met before in the world, different parts of the world. May them be well, happy, and peaceful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the inspiration.
Okay.
All right, now we can transition to our two speakers, Xiang and Tian, to share their practice because they come from China and they have a lot of experience, but they learn a lot from Professor Miller as well. So let's just welcome them, share their experience and their examples in teaching. Welcome, Xiang.
Hi. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Professor Miller. Those love and well and happiness meditation brought me back to the summer in 2019, because that was when I took Professor Miller's class, Holistic Education in OISI. And thank you, everybody, to come to our book talk. So I prepared some slides. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Xiang Li, and I'm from China. I graduated from OISI in 2019, majoring in curriculum and pedagogy. I am now an English teacher. I'm also an online English course designer. So Dr. Miller, he invited me to write a chapter for his book about Taoism. So from that moment, I was kind of like reflecting as my experience and my understanding about Taoism as a Chinese growing up in China. So my chapter could be simply divided into two parts. In the first part, I talked about the influence of Taoist philosophy on Chinese people briefly. I also narrated my experience visiting one of the most famous Taoist mountains in China, Mount Laoshan in Qingdao. Where I met a bunch of people. They attended a type of like a Taoist wellness camp. So they lived in the mountain for several weeks, and they follow this traditional Taoism practices like Tai Chi, meditation, and living a very minimal lifestyle. And that type of camp can help them type of relieve their stress and anxiety from like the modern life. And from that, I started to think about how Taoism kind of like changed or influenced every Chinese people's daily life. So as Chinese, I feel like Taoism is more like a lifestyle instead of like a religion, because it has penetrated in every facet of our daily life. I hear some examples, like we have like 24 Jieqi system. So we modify our regimen based on the change of time. So like in the spring, what we should eat, and we also change the diet in summer and autumn and winter. We also kind of like invented a series of physical activities to nourish the inner balance, yin-yang balance, like Tai Chi and Qigong. And also I introduced the traditional Chinese medicine, which divided human body constitution into 9 types based on people's yin and yang division. Yeah, so that is the first part of my chapter. And in the second half, I record my own experience as a teacher teaching in a high school in Suzhou. So Suzhou is a very famous city for its classical gardens. And along with the students, we started a students club, which is called World Heritage Club. So we did a series of volunteer work in one of the most famous gardens in Suzhou, the humble administrator's garden, Zhuozhenyuan. So I feel like when I look back at that experience, I feel like that experience actually can really reveal some Taoist wisdom in education and could be applied into other educational settings. So the first thing that I learned from the experience is that nature could be the greatest teacher in all time. So when we trapped our students into like a 4-wall classroom, they can only learn things from the textbook, or maybe a better version of the textbook, which is PowerPoint slides. But still, the facts that they learn are very monotonous, very passive, and very inefficient. But when we bring the students into nature, they could learn much, much more and much massively. For example, my students when they do the volunteer work in the garden, they actually learn about history and culture from like everything they do. Basically, they learn those historical facts from the stone, from the leaves, from the calligraphy, from the architecture in the garden, instead of from the textbook. Also, I feel like when my students, they did some basic volunteer work, such as clean the garden and be the tour guide. When they did this kind of physical work, they kind of focus on the moment. They stop watching their phones, they stop being trapped, distracted, but they learned how to focus. And through that, they kind of like recapture the cosmic energy from the nature. And I feel like they felt more relaxed and feel like they relieved their stress from the very competitive academic learning environment. So yeah, I think bring our students to nature, that could be important and useful strategy that we could implement in our teaching. And the second thing I learned is that we need to learn how to be a wu-wei teacher. So wu-wei can be translated into non-action. But in most of the occasions, teachers tried too hard. We always force our students to learn. We want to open their brain and pour the knowledge into their brain, but that's kind of like unrealistic. So I always think about how can we give autonomy to our students. So in my experience, when I worked with my students in the Suzhou Garden, although that was kind of like a class and I need to mark them, but I didn't really give any predetermined goals for them to achieve. And I didn't set up any type of criteria for our assignment. So I give full autonomy to my students. I let them design what they want to learn and what type of the final project they can do. So they have this decision, this right for decision. And it turned out to be that they learned so much that even much more than I expected. So yeah, sometimes I think as teachers, we should learn to try, like Jack said, to try not much effort into our teaching and try to give away autonomy to our students. And the last thing that I learned from experience is that I think that's the most important thing as a teacher. How do we foster balance and harmony in our classroom? Like in Taoism, we have this balance between yin and yang. And in the classroom, I think every teacher could feel a type of energy, a qi flowing in the classroom. That is kind of like a classroom atmosphere. So how do we foster, nourish the positive atmosphere going on in our classroom? So I wrote a little bit about that in my chapter. And I feel like the most important thing is that we need to be genuine ourselves. Sometimes people say that as teachers, you should not show your real self, because if you do that, the students may feel like you are more like their students other than their teachers. But I don't agree with that. I think that sometimes being like a friend of our students is not a bad thing. And only when we try to be ourselves in front of our students and try to show this genuine, our students can feel that, and that really contributes to fostering this good energy between a teacher and students, also between students. So I observed some positive changes in my students when we did that like garden protection activity. So yeah, I wrote a little bit about that too. Yeah, so that's mainly the things I wrote in my chapter, and I will give Tian. So could you please introduce your chapter too?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Xiang. I really enjoy reading your chapter, the first chapter, a lot of stories. It reminds me about my visit to Suzhou, the gardens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now let's welcome Tian.
Thank you. Thank you, Xiang, for presentation on your chapter, and thank you everyone for inviting me to do a book talk about my chapter. So this is can everyone see the screen now? Yeah. Great.
Mhm.
So a little bit background about me. So I wanted to be an educator from a very early age. So after receiving my BS in childhood and elementary education, pre-K to 4 at Pennsylvania State University, I earned my MAd in curriculum and pedagogy at University of Toronto in 2019. And I had teaching experiences in China, Sri Lanka, US, and Canada. And I started my career as a kindergarten teacher first, and then I'm working with secondary and high school students now to provide guidance and design curriculum related to academic planning and undergrad applications. So my philosophy is believing that every child is naturally an active and curious learner. My goal is to create academically engaging learning experiences through an environment that fosters creativity, curiosity, and kindness. And yeah, so my chapter is about yin and yang in the classroom and the teacher's role. Since my background was early elementary educator, so my chapter illustrates how I incorporate the concept of yin and yang in a kindergarten classroom. So it is very practical, which includes 3 very detailed lesson plans about block play. So what is yin and yang? Jack has mentioned it before. Yin and yang is a Chinese philosophical concept that describes opposite but interconnected forces. Examples you can see here is black and white, bright and dark, night and day, cold and hot, like that. But our book is not about religion, Taoist. So we bring the concept into education. Yin and yang is the balance of we're achieving in the classroom. And these are the examples Jack has mentioned before. Individual versus group, knowledge versus imagination, rational, intuitive, assessment, instruction, and etc. And so yin and yang should interact to create wholeness in the classroom. And like I mentioned before, I used to be a kindergarten teacher, so I stresses the importance of play in childhood and elementary education. Many people doubt too much play is meaningless because it will result in poor performance in development and academic. However, they underestimate the power of play, that it actually balances the classroom. And play is very important. It builds imagination and creativity. During play, kids stretch their imaginations. They create make-believe games or get lost in the pretend worlds. Children act out different solutions while boosting their confidence too. So they make their own rules and learn how to follow or adapt those rules as needed. For example, if we have a guided play about creating a zoo, and they will follow some certain rules based on their observation in the daily life, like the polar bear live with ice, and like giraffe or lion lives in the jungle, things like that. So they follow the rules. But using the blocks, we're not giving them the real materials like sand or ice or water to build the block zoo. So they will make the rule like they will use the green block as plants, like pretend it's the tree, and they will use the white blocks as ice to build their zoo. So that's how they make their own rule, and everybody follow and adapt these rules as needed. So play delivers emotional and behavioral benefits. Play improves literacy. Play encourages greater interdependence and physical fitness. A guided play is not only build imagination and creativity, but also foster reasoning and problem-solving skills. So that is balancing, we balance yin and yang, because imagination and reasons, problem-solving and creativity. Yeah. So overall, I believe that early childhood educator must create an atmosphere that encourages free but also purposeful exploration. The best teachers pay close attention to each child's unique talents and craft personalized hands-on learning opportunities that spark natural curiosity. We as a teacher, we should not support them in achieving academic success, but also help them to be a better person, to be a whole person who cares lives, be respectful and insightful. So play can be both fun and educational. The kindergarteners need a balance of child-centered play in the presence of engaged teachers and a guided and focused learning. So in my chapter, it talks more about achieving balance yin and yang in the classroom, and hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, you just complement your presentation, one focusing on early childhood education, the other focusing on high school students. So these examples are very, very helpful.
All right, so the first question goes, do you think it is possible to reintroduce ancient Taoist philosophy and content in the training of contemporary and modern educators?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think there's such value in bringing in such a philosophy that it's been around for thousands of years and has helped millions of people, but trying to adapt it to education so that it has a more, people can see the relevance, so the teachers can see the relevance and to bring it into their, and the thing is, it's not only about pedagogy, but it's about a way of living that's more in harmony with nature. So I think there is so much relevance that can be applied.
那刚才呢，就是这个Miller 教授他有说到，就是说这个首先我们会肯定说它的这个价值是很高的，就是我们肯定是想要把这个已经有几千年历史的一个哲学，能够重新在现代的教师教育当中赋予生命。那它的重点呢，其实是在于这个不仅仅是，就是说如果我们要将这个道家的思想运用在就是这个教育学上面的话，它其实不仅仅是教学法。就是不仅仅是这个技术或者是说课堂上面的一个事情，而是说我们可以尝试就是教给老师或者是向老师分享这样一种生活的方式对，然后呢这个生活的方式呢，就是我们刚才有聊到的，比如说跟自然有所亲近然后甚至是自己的这个找到内心的平静等等，也就是说这个并不仅仅是技术上面的专业层面的这样的一个交流，而更多的是跟这个老师自己的内心的身心方面的这个有关。Do you think there should be development of educational materials and research on the subject of Taoist educational philosophy so that
I think definitely there should be both quantitative and qualitative research that can be done of when people employ the Taoist approach, right? So you could interview teachers and students about what they're experiencing and how they feel about but you could also do quantitative in terms of how it affects their skill development, right? Because I think, again, using these approaches should allow, and as again, both Tian and Xiang have talked about, it's enjoyable for students. They like being in a Taoist classroom. Because it's generally a happy place. So I think that they will they'll feel better, but hopefully they'll also perform better, right? But we also have to not push too much about the, we get away too much from the effortless action, so it's a balance, right? Yeah. Again, Sean and Tian may want to have to say something too. I just don't want to say everything, but maybe you want to translate mine and let them say something. Yeah.
Yeah.OK， 是，那么刚才呢，就是 Miller 教授有讲到，就是说这个答案也是肯定的。那其实我们有很多的定量和定性的研究可以去做，比如说可以去采访老师和学生，那这个可能是一个就是定性的、质性的这样的一个研究方式。那也可以做一些量化的研究方式，比如说去研究采取这样的一个教育哲学或者是教育的这个理念和课程是否对于老师和学生的技能发展有所帮助。那他再次强调呢，其实我们使用就是道家的这样的一些思想去融入到教育教学当中，是能够为了让学生能够更加的就是享受在这个课堂当中进行学习，因为这是一个就是从根本上面来讲是一个内源性的一个非常快乐的一个地方。而且就是如果说他们能够在课堂当中感受到更多的这样积极的一些力量，他们能够更开心的话，那他们也更有可能在学术成绩上面取得更好的表现。那另外一个需要注意的地方就是不要就是我们叫什么呢？用力过猛，因为我们还要就是注意说就是无为的这个部分，就是要注意到说不要说太过于强制性的或者是太过于执念的要去这个推进这样的一个课堂。It seems that the combination of Taoist thought and the very modern idea of holistic education is complementary, and it seems to give new life to such an ancient idea. Do you have any guidance on how to better apply Taoist thought in teaching from a practical application perspective? So I guess so we talked a lot about like theorizing Taoist philosophy and holistic education, but then maybe the audience is asking about like how exactly do you do that? What are maybe some activities or pedagogies or actual practices that you do in classroom to foster a Taoist education? Yeah.
Well, I'll speak briefly, but maybe Tian and Xiang should say something. And that this is where holistic education, I mean, there's so much that we could talk about holistic education, of how you, the different curriculum and strategies that can be brought into. So I just say very briefly that there's 3 different approaches to teaching that we try to do in holistic education. Transmission, which is that's usually lecture or just giving information. Then there's transaction, which is interactive, where there's question, where there is interaction between the student and the teacher and student, and it's more things around like problem solving. And then there's what's called transformational education, which reaches the inner life of the child and stimulates their creativity. So you try to bring all those 3 things into a holistic classroom, right? And bringing them together, again, there brings like an energy to the classroom and hopefully develops the whole child. So, but again, that's a very big question. And again, I've written several books on holistic education. The main book I've written is called The Holistic Curriculum. And there's a school in Toronto, it's called the Equinox Holistic School, that's tried to take these ideas and implement them at the elementary level.
All right, thank you. 那刚才呢 Miller 教授有讲到，就是说这个问题非常的有趣，因为其实在全人教育这个领域，有好多种不同的这个课程和策略可以被运用在这个实际的教学当中。那么去总结一下呢，就是说大致上面来讲，其实是有3种比较这个怎么说呢，比较常见的这个策略或者是方式。那第一种呢，我们叫做英文叫做 transmission， 它更多的是一种传递的方式。就是说可能传统上面来讲，就是老师把这个知识塞给学生，或者是把这个知识给传递给学生，我们这个叫做传递，就 transmission。第二个叫做 transaction， 那中文呢，我们可以就是把它大概理解成互动这样的一个意思，就是它其实是强调一个互动性，也其实在这个课堂当中有学生和老师之间的互动，那互动那就是一来一往嘛，对吧？然后呢，也有学生跟学生之间的互动。那第3种呢，其实可能就是比较难做到的，我们叫做转换或者是转化，也就是说它能够就是触摸到或者是影响到培养到孩子的或者学生的这样的一个内在的生活和内在的这个心灵，然后并且去尝试去这个激发他们的一些创造力。那把这3种这个策略，也即是这个我们讲什么传递，然后呢互动和转化，把这3种策略就是放到一起。 才能够真正的把这样的能量注入到课堂当中。然后呢，Miller 教授还说到，其实这是一个很大的一个话题。然后他本人其实也写过很多关于这个方面的书，然后大家如果感兴趣的话，也可以去看一下。比如说他写过一个叫做《全人课程》的这样的一个书。然后呢，另外就是其实在加拿大就是有一个学校叫做 Equinox Holistic School， 那这个学校它其实就是在尝试把这样的很多的全人教育的思想跟理念运用在这个实践当中。然后呢，大家如果感兴趣的话呢，那下来也可以就是找到我们来更多的就是问询或者是这个推荐这方面的一些资料。
So, Xiang and Tian, would you also like to share some of the practical advice? Because that's a lot of parents and teachers, they're interested in how to apply Taoism into the classroom.
Yeah, I record some of the things that we did in Professor Miller's class, Holistic Education. I remember that in the beginning of each class, we did like the love, the well-being meditation, like
Loving kindness.
love, kindness, and well. So like may you and may your friends, may your family, may everything on this planet be happy, well, and peaceful. Yeah, we did that in the beginning of each class. And I remember that we need to, close the door. So if you are late, you gotta wait outside because it was a very quiet and very kind of like detached environment. So everybody could really like feel the inner peace. I think that could be a practice that teachers can do because I remember that when I was in elementary school, and I always remember we had a art teacher that she always, like in the beginning of her class, she always say that everybody be quiet for 1 minute. You can feel a comfortable position, and that is how she started her class. I feel like that is something that teachers can do, especially for young kids, because young kids are quite energetic. They could not like if it's the afternoon, like the beginning of the afternoon class, they may not be able to focus. So teachers can use this meditation to try to make your students enter the mode of learning. Yeah, that is one. And also, I remember that Professor Miller asked us to write journals. So in those journals, we reflected on our learning process and what we absorbed from the class. For example, we did a journal focusing on our change of mood after we do the frequent meditation. So after one meditation, we need to write a journal talking about how you felt after the meditation, and some like a very there is no structure requirement for the journal, but just to write down your feeling, some changes that you can feel on your body and your spirit before and after you do the meditation. So maybe that could be also like easy to achieve practice that you can do, like ask your students to write this type of journals. Like this is also a good way to keep communication between you and your students. And also because in my chapter I mentioned that to break the limit of the forward classroom. So maybe bring your students to the nature, and you can just simply have a class or maybe halfway for a class in nature. Especially for teaching literature, I feel like if you're a Chinese teacher or English teacher, why not just bring your students to the lawn, to the grassland, and you can read poems and read the articles together if the weather is nice. I think the students may feel more concentrated and very fresh compared with sitting in the classroom and reading the monotonous textbook. Yeah, so these are the three kind of like I feel like could be realistic and easy to practice ways. Yeah.
好的，那非常感谢。刚才呢，就是想有讲到哈，就是介绍了3种方法，就是大家如果作为教育者的话，可以去考虑一下。第一种呢，就是冥想，其实就是刚刚他分享到，就是在他上这个 Miller 教授的这个课的时候，他们之前会在每一节课的一开始做我们刚才做过的这样的一个冥想。然后如果说有人迟到的话，你甚至要在外面等着，因为这个应该是一个非常私密的、非常安静的这样的一个空间。然后呢，他还记得就是在他自己上小学的时候呢，曾经有一个艺术老师，然后呢，在每一节课开始的时候，他都会让大家就是安静1分钟， 这样子的话，他就可以就是开始他的课堂。那这样子的一个目的呢，是因为有一些小一点的孩子可能就是能量特别多嘛，然后可能比较活泼，那用这样的一个方式，比如说1分钟的安静，或者是一个很简单的一个小小的一个冥想活动，可以让大家更好的就是切换到学习的这样的一个模式里面来。第二个呢，就是他也回忆到之前在上米尔教授的课的时候，教授有让过他们就是写这样的一些journal，就是一些这样的一个笔记，或者是这个记录吧，这样的一种书写的一个形式。那这个记录呢，它就会要求，比如说大家去记录你在冥想前后的这样情绪的一个转换。然后呢，这个其实也并没有说要求有一个特定的格式或者怎么样，只是想让大家把自己的这个感受给写下来。然后这个也可以是在一个课堂里面，不管是中小学还是怎样，一个非常简单的一个方式。那第三个呢，就是他在自己的这个章节里面也有讲到，就是特别的注意到这个自然教育，或者是把自然融入到教育。比如说，如果说天气好的话，那大家为什么不可以就是带学生出去在草地上面学习，对吧？比如说，如果是一个文学课的话，大家可以一起在外面读书，或者一起在外面讨论。那在这样的一个环境当中，学生非常有可能会更加能够集中注意力，然后甚至觉得这个环境是让他感觉到愉悦的，让他感觉到新鲜的啊。那以上就是这个翔刚刚有介绍的这个3种方法。
So, first of all, I would like to add on what Xiang has said about the previous question. I would like to share a very practical tip for the teacher doing meditation with the little ones, because the little ones couldn't stay still for a minute and have their eyes closed and not moving or make any noises. So one very useful tip is use their imaginations. So before you start meditation, let them know that everyone, now we are having a bubble inside your mouth, and so we have to keep the bubble in your mouth. So everybody take a deep breath in and hold the bubble. So when they hold in the bubble, they are not going to make any noise, and they will protect their bubbles and stay there for a minute. So let's begin the meditation. So I found it's very useful to do that. Yeah, and going off the question you mentioned, would you like me to just respond in Mandarin so Dora don't have to
sure.
translate it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So 我觉得这个是首先呢，这个跟这个老师他所在的幼儿园宣传的一个教育理念非常有关系。就如果他是一个作为中国的比较传统的幼儿园，那他招收的老师和他对老师的期待就是老师是管理者，学生是 follower， 就是遵从者。但如果这个幼儿园的教育理念不一样，比较西方化，或者更细节来说，我们西方有 Montessori kindergarten， 就蒙特梭利的教育理念，或 Reggio 的教育理念，就比较偏欧洲的或者西方的那教育理念下，那他们对幼师的 expectation 又不一样。我们首先来说，就是幼师他的角色和功能是非常复杂的、多元的和全面性的。他在中国的传统理念下，就是有可能幼师像是一个有点像保姆的形式，甚至这样子存在。但其实西方环境下，我们对幼师期待是反而是希望这个老师能跟小朋友一起共同成长。那他首先他要作为一个导师的角色，就是他必须要对幼儿认知的发展特点非常的了解，然后懂得应该让小朋友们就通过体验快乐而去主动的学习，而不是被动去学习，然后去鼓励小朋友做他们力所能及的事情，然后去尊重和理解小朋友的这个精神世界的丰富性，鼓励他们有创造的想法和行为，然后让他们自由表达，给他们空间去树立这样一个自信心，这个是导师的角色。然后第二个我觉得非常重要是叫做联络者 communicator 的角色，因为小朋友他年龄很小，然后他从家庭进到幼儿园的时候，他会对陌生的幼儿园的环境产生一种就自然的排斥和抵触，所以才会有些小朋友感觉是在学校里不听话不听老师的，然后会导致有些老师会更生气，然后就是变成一个 bad cycle 那个死循环，所以这个时候就是幼儿园老师会是需要就是发自内心的对小朋友有一种关心和爱护，在他的言行举止中都透露出他对这个孩子是认真的，然后有充满真挚的那个关心在里面。因为小孩子虽然说小，但是他们是能够读懂大人的表情，然后也能感觉到这个真实性的。当他们感觉自己是受重视、被关心，然后跟这个 adult 就跟这个成年人是有建立这样子的一个bonding 在的时候，他才能逐步的接纳这个学习环境和这个整个幼儿园和其他的学生。然后第三个就是伙伴的角色，这个就是我们西方的幼儿教育里面很强调的，就是我们不是管理者，我们跟学生是平起平坐的。像我以前在幼儿园里，我对小朋友的称呼就是 friends， 我们是朋友，我不是说强调说 I'm the teacher, you are the student, but we are friends。就是在幼儿的这个项目活动中，其实最重要的就是听幼儿的声音，就 listen。Be a good listener， 听他内心丰富的世界，然后这样子才能够知道他需要什么，然后我们是主动提出帮助，然后让学生自己进入一个主动学习的状态，然后我们是一个支持者这样子。然后还有一个就是记录者的角色，这也很重要，就是 making documentation， 了解他们是怎么思维的，然后以照片或者是文字的记录下每个学生的各项特征，包括他们是怎么跟成年人或者跟学生进行互动，他们是怎么观察，怎么运用他们的想象力和怎么去表达的。因为这样子的记录不仅仅是给老师一个 track， 就是这个学生在这个幼儿园的3年时间内他是怎么成长的，然后他可以去研究每个学生的特性，然后做一个 self development。然后其次呢，也可以给家长看，因为家长每天其实不知道在幼儿园里发生了什么事情，然后这种记录的东西会给家长了解他们的孩子在学校到底是怎么样获得经验，怎么样是过一个真实的经验的。然后就是我觉得这是一个记录是就是幼儿园老师他的一个很重要的一点，他也会促进自己的这个对自己教学技巧的一个 reflection。然后同时就是把这个记录下来的东西给到家长之后，以后等小朋友长大了，然后再回头看自己以前的这些以前小时候的东西，会觉得非常有意义。然后我觉得选择学校的话，还是以不要当然离家近和远是一个很重要的因素，但是很重要的还是看这个学校的教育理念是不是和家长的理念相符合。因为刚刚这个这个问题上的这位嘉宾他说跟他理念其实已经不太符合了，然后跟学生也不符合。那我觉得长期来说，这就是一个会有一些不好的 negative 的 effects 在小朋友的成长上面，所以可能会需要考虑一下，是不是应该要换一个教学理念跟自己更相符合的学校比较好。
好的，谢谢，非常感谢阮田。All right, so because we're running out of time, and people also ask a question about where they can purchase the book, because we want to give out this information. That's the main purpose, one of the main purposes for us to have this event. So where to get the book? If you're in the US or Canada, you can order the book from Amazon. And here I just want to share with you this book. It's not like a huge book. It's a very easy read. A lot of examples, like language, beautiful language, easy to comprehend. So I highly recommend. Look, I put a lot of stickers in this book, and you can just find on Amazon if you're in China. But if you have like Amazon account, then you can still order it, or you can get electronic copy. You don't have to get a hard copy. Maybe Dora, you can explain in Chinese about where to get the book.
Well, I think you could also try to order directly from University
from
of
the
Toronto
press.
Press. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, from the publisher. You can also
Yeah,
order
and
directly.
you could get I think the ebook would be the easiest one to get, right? So yeah.
Mhm.
to
Oh,
go to-
also
yeah.
another thing, as Professor Miller mentioned, if you're university students or you work at university, very likely some of Chinese prestigious university, top university like Beida or Tsinghua, or they have access to the book, like ebook. So you can also read it,
Mhm,
download it from your university website,
Mhm, mhm.
just to check it out. And also right now I have a Dora just explain how to get it if you're in China.
就是说，其实如果说你在美国的话，你就是直接在 Amazon 上面就可以买。然后如果在国内的话，就是主要有2种方式。第一个就是如果你有一个就是其他地区的这个 Amazon 的账号，那你就可以直接在 Kindle 上面购买。我不太清楚，如果你是中国区的账号可不可以，但是大家可以试一下。我们是不知道可不可以把那个 Amazon 的那个 link 或者是怎么样，反正大家就是可以自己去搜一下。很有可能是可以用 Kindle ebook 的方式购买的。然后另外一个就是，如果说你有高校的账号，那一般情况下你应该是可以能够有一个，因为Miller 教授把这个跟那个学校跟这个多伦多大学就是商量，然后把它变成一个公开获取的这样的一个资源。所以说，如果说你是在高校里面任职或者是上学，现在那非常的 likely 你是可以在你的学校图书馆，就是通过你学校的图书馆去搜索。不要在网上搜索，就通过学校图书馆去搜索，应该就是能够找得到这一本书。对。
Yeah, and also in the future, for example, next year, if the COVID situation in China improve and open up, we can invite Professor Miller to take a tour, take a trip to China, and we'll bring books and you can sign the books, right?
Yeah.
So what I learned most from this book is Professor Miller and also Tian and Xiang, they just use like comparative perspectives. It just explain some of the concept that we are really familiar with, but we haven't really paid a lot of attention. Because one of the audience asked, how come in China nowadays people kind of overlook this kind of ancient wisdom, let alone apply it into modern time classroom? And I think one big reason is just we just feel like it's just belong to like far away, long distance, like a long time ago. So I think this is a good reminder that Professor Miller just remind us these ancient wisdom can still be applied in our classroom and benefit in our daily life, especially now, probably benefit even more than before. Think about all the crises we're in, pandemic, climate change. So I think this is a great reminder for us to combine the ancient Chinese wisdom into the modern society. So thank you so much for this very timely book and reminder for your inspirations.